4 o'clock show for you today, and I'd like to welcome my first guest, Bob Flanders, into the studio.
Nice to be here.
I appreciate your taking the time to come downtown in your run for the GOP nod for the U.S. Senate. You just put out an announcement this week, a very big one, about your campaign and how you comport yourself and whose money you take. And you said you will not take any opioid manufacturers' money, and you're calling on Senator Sheldon Whitehouse to do the same.
Not only that, I'm calling on him to give back the donations. I think he accepted about $32,000 from opioid manufacturers. We just had a big press release and a CNN story about how these opioid folks have been bribing doctors to prescribe them and overprescribe them, and people are dying left and right, averaging 6 a week here in Rhode Island. And Senator Whitehouse is taking these donations, and I think he should give them back. I'm not going to take any.
And how big of a part of the problem is it in DC with politicians who take this money as not just states but the federal government looks to address this crisis? The president has almost gone as far to enforce that it's an actual emergency. But how pervasive is money really driving the opioid problem?
Absolutely, and we just had this doctor in Rhode Island, Dr. Rosenberg, who's now been sentenced to jail for accepting bribes to overprescribe these pills. People are dying all over the country. Here in Rhode Island, it's hard to find somebody who hasn't been affected by this crisis, either in a family or knowing somebody. So to have doctors being bribed in essence, and our senator taking money from these folks and actually investing in these stocks, it's absolutely shameful.
What's the reaction been to your putting this statement out here this week, Bob?
Well, I think people are taking a step back and reassessing whether this is somebody they should be supporting. You can't have this. This is the old Washington game where you take money from these people. He also torpedoed legislation that would have enforced these laws against the pill mills. He was the sponsor of it while he's taking the money, while he's investing. We can't have that. That's why I'm running. Stop.
Stepping up to sort of stop the well, so to speak, of where this money comes from.
We have to. I mean, sure, money is the mother's milk of politics, but we can't have our politicians in essence being corrupted by these donations and not doing the people's work here and hurting Rhode Islanders, and to the point where it's blood money. It's actually blood money on the hands of Senator Whitehouse to go ahead and take this money, knowing that it's killing people and having devastating effects.
Well, we'll likely ask the senator his position on your statement this week, but again, the big announcement from the campaign. Talk with us about your campaign so far, Bob. There's other issues I want to hit on as well. But as you've been going around, what have you been hearing from Rhode Islanders that they are looking to see from one of their U.S. senators in Washington?
They want a senator who is a problem solver, somebody who's going to work with both sides, who's going to be as nonpartisan as anybody can be to try and solve problems, bring both sides together. They're sick of politics as usual. They want somebody who's got a proven track record of working with both sides, and I think that's what I'm bringing to the table. Yes, I'm running as a Republican, but I'm an independent. I'm going to disagree with President Trump when I think he's wrong, but I'm going to support him when I think it's good for Rhode Island. So they want a senator who's going to put country and state above party, and that's what I'm all about.
You've got to get out of a GOP primary first. We've heard from your opponent, Bobby Nardolillo, state representative, who questioned your taking money from across the aisle. Do you have concerns in the primary, or do you think that this message of yours is resonating with GOP voters?
I think it's resonating with GOP voters. Sure, I have a primary, and I'm taking it seriously. But when you look at the experience, when you look at the education, when you look at my background, I think I'm going to compare very favorably to Mr. Nardolillo.
So let's talk with another issue that we've been seeing in the past several weeks here. This is the issue on guns. We just saw today students across the state take part in walkouts. I just was up with the Providence students going up to the State House. Tell us about your position if you were in DC and how you think is the best answer to what we're facing as a country.
All right, the best answer, in my opinion, is we need to beef up school security. You can't go into a courthouse, an airport, even a basketball game at URI without having armed guards protecting the people who are there. Our students are sitting ducks right now. We've got to beef up school security, and while we fight about gun control measures, let's not forget about the kids. Let's do whatever we can to recruit retired military, retired police, and school security guards to protect these kids.
In addition to security guards, what do you think? Should teachers be armed?
I wouldn't mandate that, but they have Second Amendment rights just like the rest of us. If somebody has the training, the background, the licensing, and they want to protect themselves, I'm not going to send them in there as sitting ducks to some nutcase like this guy Cruz, who walked in there and blew people away before the police can arrive. So teachers have a right to protect themselves, but I wouldn't mandate it.
And let's talk about the funding about that. We had Representative Greg Amori and a few weeks ago here in Rhode Island looking at how possibly to help schools get more school resource officers. We do know that some states are cash strapped. We know Rhode Island is as well. Is there money at the federal level to potentially assist schools in this measure? What bucket could that possibly come from, as we're standing here facing a $60 million budget shortfall in Rhode Island, $200 million next year? Could states look to the feds to assist them in this matter?
I believe they can and should, because I think there's no more precious asset than our children. We have to provide room to help the states. I wouldn't dictate how they provide security, but I would provide funding for training, for recruitment, and leave it up to the districts at the local level to decide how to do this. But we have to protect our children and grandchildren.
And do you think the school resource officers should be in all schools? We see them mostly in middle and high school now. I mean, do elementary schools need this type of protection as well?
Absolutely. I don't see how we can leave them vulnerable. We've got to have at least resources locally, and I would look for volunteers, retired military, retired police. Let's put together a volunteer program that the federal government can get behind to support this.
Well, another hot topic issue I wanted to get your take on. Let's talk a little bit. I've had folks in here in the studio talking about immigration, talking about DACA, talking about Dreamers. We saw Trump's arbitrary deadline come and go last week saying to the Congress, you need to fix this. Can Congress solve the immigration debate?
Absolutely. I think this is an issue that's calling out for compromise. Both sides have already indicated that we ought to come up with a solution for the so-called DACA children. But it's stalled over to what extent do we need a complete wall to wall off the folks coming from south of the border. I think this is a compromise that's got to happen. We can't just keep kicking this down the road. And this is where I think someone like myself, who's basically going to deal with this on a nonpartisan basis, can help to bring both sides together and solve this problem.
Do you think there really is a call for to get bipartisan action in DC? It's so partisan right now. Is there any chance of getting to turn the corner on this?
Yes, absolutely. And people are crying out for it, because what was wrong with Obamacare was all Democrats. What was wrong with the tax plan that the Republicans put forward, it's all Republicans. We need bipartisan support for things. So I think people want people to go down there and be centrists and be people who are moderates and be willing to work with others and not just be these hyper left or hyper right partisans.
So let's talk a little bit about the president. Let's kind of give him a report card, if you will. As you said, you'd support some things and not support others. What do you think he's done a good job on so far?
Well, I think good job I would give him on at least starting this tax bill, which I think is a good first step. Put more money in Rhode Islanders' pockets and across the country. I give him credit for that. I don't like the way he's handling his personnel situations. I mean, there's just chaos in the White House. His personality is not helping. All the tweeting, all the braggadocio. I think most people can leave that behind and just have him concentrate on what he campaigned on instead of all this other nonsense. So I give him high marks on helping the military, ISIS. I think he's doing a good job there, but I disagree with him on his tariffs, on the way he's handled Tillerson. I think is abominable. It's a mixed bag, and I'm going to call balls and strikes on this guy. Even though I'm running as a Republican, I'm not going to stand for anything that's not in the best interest of Rhode Islanders.
And so let's talk a little bit. Well, we have you here in the studio. You're going around the state listening to Rhode Islanders, what they're looking for at the federal level. Have you been having talks at the national level with folks saying, here's why I'm looking to run for the state of Rhode Island? Will we see national folks involved in your campaign, Bob?
I hope so, but at this stage, unfortunately, Rhode Island is not high on their radar because they're focusing on those states where Trump did well and there's a Democrat up for election. Mm-hmm. So, and I've got a primary, so they're saying to me, show us that you can be prevailing in the primary, that you can raise money and have support locally. But as you know, the primary is very late in the game here, not until mid-September almost. And so if they do come in, I expect it won't be until late.
Well, we did just see what happened in Pennsylvania yesterday with the 18th congressional special election. We did see, looks like, the Democrat pulling it out in what was a Trump district. Do you think we'll see this around the country? What do you expect from the midterms as a whole?
I think it'll be close, but in the Senate, I think it's very unlikely that control will shift to the Democrats. There are 24 or so Democrats up for election, only 8 Republicans, so they're much more exposed than the Republicans are. So I think that the Senate will stay in Republican hands. The House is more of an iffy situation, but I think it's going to be close, as it was in this Pennsylvania case. So every vote counts, and I hope people listening to this broadcast will get out there and support the candidates that they think have the best chance of helping Rhode Island.
So let's flip a little bit back to Congress. Let's flip to the other chamber on the House side. The House Intelligence just did say that they are wrapping up the Russia investigation. Let's talk a little bit about Russia and its specter hanging over the Trump administration. Do you think this is really having a profound impact both on his ability to govern with the Mueller investigation moving forward? Do you think Mueller will find anything?
Look, I'm a former judge, so I like to wait until the evidence is in. I want to see what the facts are. So far, there's been no evidence of collusion. There's been a lot of things that are being turned up that we didn't know about, but so far, there hasn't been any solid evidence that there was real collusion here. But my view is let's let Mueller do his job. Let's look at the evidence and not prematurely judge what the situation is. Well,
we're going to be keeping an eye on D.C. We're going to be keeping an eye on the GOP primary for the U.S. Senate here in Rhode Island. Big announcement this week about not taking opioid manufacturers' money. Anything else you'd like viewers to know while we have you in studio here today? I'm sure we'll have you back soon, but while we have you here.
No, I just would add a final plea that let's get somebody down there who's a problem solver, who can work with both sides. We need compromise. We need folks who can work from both ends of the spectrum. We don't need another career politician. It's time to put practical term limits on all the folks who have made a career out of this. Let's get some new, fresh blood down there.
Okay, Bob Flanders, GOP candidate for the U.S. Senate here in Rhode Island. I appreciate your taking the time to come in. I'll let you go around the corner and I'll welcome the next guest on.
Thanks,
okay,
Kate.
Thank you very much. Bob Flanders, appreciate his taking the time to come in. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Josh Fenton with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Okay.